Hello there, I'm Leo Walter for Kit Guru. This case is the Corsair Carbide 400Q. We recently saw the 600C. There's actually a pair of those, 600, 600C, 600Q, C for clear, Q for quiet. It's the same deal with the 400. This is the quiet version, which means that the two side panels have this sound deadening material. They are slightly different to each other in that the one panel has a cutout to give you a bit of clearance behind it, but the actual steel construction is the same, the material is the same, it's just the precise location of the material varies slightly. In the 400C you'll have a socking great big window and it'll swing open, the door swings open as it does with the 600 version. This case has an SRP of $99.95. I'm guessing in the UK that's going to be a couple of pence under £80. Which puts it in the mainstream. Now, it is worth pointing out at this stage that Corsair tends to price things quite high. So if it's about £80 and it can't be far off that, then in most people's eyes that would be mainstream to slightly expensive. In Corsair's eyes, that's mainstream to actually quite good value. Don't you know, thank you very much. So we're looking at this from one point of view. If you're looking at it from the point of view of typical Corsair kit, you need to slightly skew your view. So when I'm looking at this case, first and foremost, what I'm seeing is hints of Fantex, hints of fractal design. There's little bits and pieces here and there, and then a large dose of the recent Carbide 600. The design elements are quite clear. So I'm seeing little snippets here, there and everywhere from different cases in that sort of 80 odd pound territory. Looking inside the case, I've built this with a Gigabyte Z170XP SLI motherboard. He says reading off the box. There's also a Skylake Core i7 6700 processor, some Corsair DDR4 memory, graphics cards are referenced GTX 980, and obviously the case is this, and then the power supply is Seasonic 520 watt fanless, which is slightly ironic because one of the features of this case is that the power supply cover is actually detachable, but they obviously want you to use it so you cover your power supply, so the lovely fanless power supply is actually hidden away out of sight. Photos on Kit Guru as per usual. And the cooler is unusual for me in these reviews because I typically go liquid cooled. In this instance, I've actually gone with this Fantex PHTC 120X air cooler. Not just to be perverse, the reason I've done that is actually because this case has a 140 Corsair obviously fan at the front, 120 at the rear. Now the configuration of the case means you can add fans quite easily at the top. But if you do that, you can't put a liquid cooler in there. I mean, theoretically you might, but there isn't the space. You can see it's really tight at the top. So you're going to put a liquid cooler. If you do, you're either going to replace the rear fan or replace the front fan. Now the front has a heap of space. You can go up to 280 or indeed 360 at the front. Clearly you have to first remove the stock 140 fan, which is fine. I have no problem with that in the sense that you can do it, but if you're buying a case such as the Fractal Design Define R5, it's an empty box. You can whack in any cooling you like. You're not chucking away any stock fans. The 140 fan at the front strikes me as one of the features of this case, so it seems a crying shame to then remove it to put a liquid cooler in. So I thought, oh, what the hey, let's put an air cooler in. We don't use them often enough on Kit Guru, and it so happens that Fantex won a recent roundup of ours. It did very well indeed. So in it goes. I was also thinking to myself, in the great scheme of things, if we're taking this as being a budget-ish case, then a cooler that's just under £40 is the sort of thing people would be looking at, whereas a typical liquid cooler, you know, you're starting, well, I mean, you can get them around that sort of mark, but typically 60 or up to 100 or maybe even slightly more. So if you're budget-ish, a £38, £39 air cooler makes perfect sense. Anyway, that's what the case looks like when the system is running. Very neat and tidy. I think we're going to be, in fact, empty on that side, I would say. But then, you know, one chunky graphics card, cabling is okay. You can't really complain. Let's just turn off the power and pull out the power cord. The reason it's pretty much empty on the business side of things is because all the stuff happens at the back. But I mean, I think you could probably guess that I was going to say something like that. Let's turn it round and you'll see that it's not great, is the politest way of putting it. What we've got going on, we've got two hidden stealth 3.5-inch drive bays here, which are the other side of this cover. Now this cover is actually split The photos on KitGuru as per usual, showing both covers in place and then both covers removed. You've got some thumb screws on the back here, and you remove one thumb screw for each half of the cover. So off with the one means that you expose the two drive bays. Off with the other means you expose the power supply. Now, from the point of view of installing the system, that's no bad thing, because it means that you actually get to go, you give yourself some good access. It's not necessary, it just makes life a little easier. It's mainly really a cosmetic thing. It's for covering or uncovering things as you see fit. Now you can, once you take off the front cover, then undo 3 thumb screws. There's one there and there are 2 here. And that actually caused me a degree of frustration, possibly would be the word, because the thumb screws for the covers and the thumb screws for the caddies, they all look the same. You could have, say, silver for one and black for the other. That would be helpful, but no, there are a bunch of black thumb screws. You have to figure out which you want to release. Anyway, it doesn't take very long. Once you've done it, you've done it. So you can release the little drive tower is a bit of a grand term for 2 caddies, but the tower there, and you can, if you choose, move it forward in this direction 20 or so mil. There's an alternate set of thumb screws, holes. So if you're doing that, you're moving the tower away from the power supply towards the front of the case. Now, if you're looking at installing a liquid cooler here, that's obviously not a good thing. If you have no intention of a liquid cooler there, that's absolutely fine. You might want more room for your power supply is the point. Or if you choose, you can simply take out the 2 drive bays altogether. Now these are 3.5, 2.5, so 3.5s go at the sides, 2.5s go on there. So you can, if you choose, mount your 2.5-inch SSD or hard drive in those stealth bays. And this to me is a good thing. I've actually used one of the 3 2.5-inch dedicated bays here for my SSD, SanDisk SSD as it happens. Because it's kind of the right thing to do, but it's a struggle. My instinct would actually be to ditch this row of 3 bays. That they are a unit. You can't release one of them. Let me just show you that again. If I just release that catch instead, the bay should. I'll have to do it both sides. There we go, and you see it's actually spring-loaded. It's quite interesting in that sense. It fires a little drive up. But the 3 2.5s are all joined in one unit. So if you want to take out one of them or 2 of them or 3 of them, you take the whole caboose out. And I would actually be inclined to lose those 3 and just use the stealth bays at the bottom. But the bottom is just pointing the wrong side. And the gripe I have with these 3 bays is that the cables all want to run here, or certainly some of them do, particularly the main ATX cable, which is obviously coming from the power supply out through this hole here, and then it's going to go across there, absolutely across the 2.5s. Now the thing is, I'm going to turn it so we're lined up with that camera there, that there is no extra space. The 600C case was quite a wide fella. This is reasonably wide, but the space is all in this main compartment. Behind the motherboard tray there is space, but it's occupied by these 2.5 bays. Which means if you want to run, well, you can't run the cables across actually, it's just, it doesn't work. So you have to run the cables around. Now the thing is, Corsair has put, as you can see in the photos, as you can see there, they've put quite a decent number of anchor points for cable ties around the sort of periphery of the motherboard, but they haven't got any in the middle, which is exactly where the main ATX cable needs to be secured, because it has to kind of go around. It's fiddly. It's annoying actually, and it's unnecessary. They've come very close to doing a decent job there, and they've slightly mucked it up. It's a similar thing actually with the, in this instance, the audio cable which runs across the top of that power supply cover, because initially I routed it through one of the sort of little holes on the back, and then I discovered actually this hole here looks like a slot isn't quite big enough to mount the to feed the audio block through. There are a couple of really handy looking holes, and I thought, I'll just pop it through there, easy peasy, job done. But no, that's where the little sort of tags for the power supply cover, sort of location-y, luggy things have to just hook in. So actually I was preventing them from going into place. Bit silly. So cable management looks pretty good. You've got some decent large grommets here, here and here. The cables can go to the correct locations. You can feed your 8-pin ATX across the top of the board without too much difficulty. That is fine. On the other hand, feeding across the middle of the board, which is where the cables want to naturally, the main ATX cable wants to naturally go, not so great. When it comes to the details, things like USB 3 and such like here, anchors quite neatly, not a problem. Turn to the inside of the case, looks pretty good. Across the power supply cover, not so great, because the cables kind of trail there. So mostly it's good, but there are a couple of details that are a bit annoying. On the other hand, if you take out the 2.5-inch bays, rely on the 3.5, 2.5s at the bottom, it transforms the cable management completely. So in that sense, it's slightly vexing that Corsair didn't do that and just give up on this. Or at least hint about it in the user guide. That would be handy if they simply said, look, yes, there are bays, but kind of they're extra if you really must. Don't. But there we go. So, one other gripe I had is, if we take off the magnetic top cover, which has this sound deadening material, underneath we have the mesh top panel, which is where you can easily mount some extra fans should you choose, although I think the chance of you doing that is very, very remote. So that is easy, but a little pointless. At the front, it's a different story. As you'll see in the photos, behind this front panel is a full-length air filter. Gauze, unclip it, take it out, give it a good clean. Absolutely fine, makes perfect sense, and of course it means if you're installing a large radiator, absolutely necessary. But unclipping that is, it actually refers in the manual to basically wrench it off. You kind of can, but it feels like you're breaking stuff. I had a look at it. In fact, there are latches down each side, but they don't quite want to disengage. You can disengage 4 of the 6 really easily. The last 2, they don't want to come away. You have to kind of force it. And the thing is, if it's the sort of thing you do once when you build the thing, we can all live with that. If you actually need occasional access to an air filter, a dust filter, I don't much like that. It suggests that the fine details haven't really been checked over. There's also a dust filter on the power supply intake. So we've got mesh top, but it's covered with that noise deadening material. Full-length dust filter there, which is great, but access a bit of a pain. Dust filter on the bottom. So good, all across the piece. It is a very quiet case. Not that this microphone will necessarily pick up noise from the PC anyway, but when it was running initially, it is basically silent, and that's with the side panels off. Put the side panels on, it's just as quiet as you'd expect it to be. But then the GTX 980 when it's idling is a very quiet thing. The Fantex CPU cooler is quiet. The 2 case fans are quiet. The power supply is passively cooled. It is silent. SSD, of course. So you would expect it to be quiet. It is quiet. In fact, impressively so. So there we go. Overall, this is the Corsair Carbide 400. This happens to be the Q for quiet model. It's a decent enough case, but it does have a few annoying glitches about it. Lose those 2.5-inch drive bays off the rear, it helps cable management hugely. As to whether you're going to go liquid cooled or whether you're going to bang an air cooler in as I have, I suspect that's the obvious direction with this case, and it's the one I'd certainly recommend. It's a good enough piece of kit, allowing for those annoying little niggles, such as anchor points in the middle, but it works. Pricing to be confirmed, but I suspect it's going to be just under £80, which means it's okay, but it's got some stiff competition from cases that are now closer to 60. And in that sense, it lets the side down a little. But overall, I'm warm to this case. Warm would be the best way of describing it. So this is Leo Walder for Kit Guru, and this is the Corsair Carbide 400Q.